Hello and welcome. I'm James Azimoha and you're watching A News. Let's see your headlines. At least 270 people have died and over 1,000 are missing after a massive flash flood on the border between Nepal and Tibet. Tensions remain high over the Strait of Hormuz as the US and its allies weigh diplomacy against further military action. And Syria reconnects with the global financial system as its leader pays with a Visa card at a Damascus restaurant. At least 270 people are reportedly dead and over 1,000 are missing after a massive flash flood along the border between Nepal and China. An international rescue operation has launched with hundreds of foreign tourists unaccounted for.
The disaster hit Nepal's northern regions after severe flooding and landslides swept through villages, roads and trekking routes near the border with China. Rescue teams supported by helicopters and drones are searching for survivors as authorities continue to assess the scale of the destruction. The flooding has affected hundreds of foreign travelers in one of Nepal's most popular Himalayan tourism areas. The Nepal Tourism Board says 644 tourists are currently out of contact, including 517 foreign nationals from 19 countries. Those reported missing include travelers from India, the United States, Ukraine, Australia, the United Kingdom, Canada, Germany, South Korea, and Japan. Several European governments have issued safety warnings and emergency contacts for their citizens in Nepal. Among those missing are tourists and pilgrims traveling toward Mount Kailash and Lake Manasaravar in China. Australia said 34 citizens are unaccounted for, while authorities are working to confirm the status of affected travelers. Nepal has deployed more than 5,000 army and police personnel for search and rescue operations, evacuating residents and delivering emergency supplies to isolated areas. The disaster has triggered an international response. India has sent relief supplies, including shelters, medicines, and hygiene kits. China, the European Union, the United States, South Korea, the World Health Organization, and the Red Cross have also announced assistance. Authorities are urging travelers in affected areas to stay calm, follow official safety instructions, and report their location to police, local authorities, travel agencies, or tour operators. Early assessments suggest the flooding may have been linked to a glacier-related event that sent large amounts of water and debris into rivers, causing widespread destruction.
Extreme rainfall and flooding is also being felt across parts of Asia. Heavy rain has caused the Cao River in northern Vietnam to burst its banks. Meantime, rising water levels have submerged homes, roads and farmland, affecting communities along the river basin. Thousands have been evacuated to safety as water levels continue to rise. The United States says diplomacy remains the preferred option to resolve the dispute over Iran's nuclear program, but warns military action remains possible if talks fail. The comments come following a meeting between the U.S. Energy Secretary and the chief of the UN's nuclear watchdog.
The United States says it remains committed to resolving the dispute over Iran's nuclear program through diplomacy. U.S. Energy Secretary Chris Wright said, Washington's preferred path is a negotiated agreement backed by international inspections. However, speaking alongside the International Atomic Energy Agency Director General Rafael Grossi, Wright warned that force could be used if necessary.
Our strong desire is to end the Iranian nuclear program through negotiations and through inspections administered by the International Atomic Energy Agency. If it needs to be done through military means to destroy their nuclear facilities and the industrial might of Iran, unfortunately, we will do that too.
Grossi warned that Iran still retains significant nuclear capabilities, including around 440 kilograms of uranium enriched to 60%.
It is fair to say that we need to find an adequate solution and a long-standing and I would say predictable status quo when it comes to the nuclear issue in Iran.
Meanwhile, Tehran insists its nuclear program is aimed at civilian purposes. Iran's Atomic Energy Organization chief Mohammad Islami said the country's scientific and technological achievements have helped reduce dependence on foreign support. He accused Iran's opponents of trying to undermine its progress through sanctions, pressure, and sabotage, saying those efforts have failed. The dispute over uranium enrichment remains at the center of tensions between Washington and Tehran. The US demands limits on enrichment and expanded inspections, while Iran insists on its right to peaceful nuclear energy. Regional concerns have also grown over the security of the Strait of Hormuz. Reports say the waterway may still contain mines, despite US claims that the area has been cleared. Iran dismisses Washington's claims. Diplomatic efforts are continuing, with Qatar's Prime Minister set to visit Tehran in an effort to revive dialogue between Iran and the United States. China has criticized new US sanctions threats against Tehran. Iranian Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bagher Khalibaf welcomed Beijing's position, saying the partnership between Iran and China is based on cooperation and does not require approval from other countries. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump has commented on reports surrounding Iran's supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei's health. Trump said he does not believe Khamenei is dead, but suggested he may be seriously injured. As tensions remain high, Washington and Tehran continue to face pressure to find a diplomatic solution and avoid further escalation.
Israel's prime minister says efforts to resolve the confrontation with Iran remain uncertain. Benjamin Netanyahu claims he urged Trump to consider a tighter siege on Iran at talks in Washington last month before the latest sanctions were announced. He insists Israel will continue to act to defend itself.
We won't let Iran attack us, and if they attack us, they will suffer a blow they never dreamed of, much stronger than what they have suffered until now.
Iranian businesses say the impact of economic sanctions is starting to bite, along with the ongoing costs arising from the conflict in the Gulf.
U.S. sanctions are adding to the economic hardship in Iran, with shopkeepers saying the measures are making business and everyday life even harder amid the war. In Bandar Abbas, businesses say the impact is being felt through a weaker currency, higher prices, and greater pressure on livelihoods.
Under any circumstances, sanctions do inflict blows. The rise in the exchange rate affects life and livelihood, but ultimately we are Iranians, and Iranians know how to bypass sanctions well.
The latest restrictions, announced on Monday, could see countries trading with Iran cut off from the dollar-based financial system. The new measures come as Iran faces wider economic disruption linked to the conflict with the U.S. and Israel, which has also severely affected shipping through the Strait of Hormuz, a crucial route for around a fifth of global oil and liquefied natural gas shipments.
In the way that we are under pressure, we are 100% distressed. The youth have many grievances against the officials who, really, in my opinion, they are traitors. Why? Because they truly do not attend to the people's suffering.
General inflation stands at around 69% according to reports, with price tags on some imported foods seeing triple-digit annual cost spikes. The Iranian rial has also plummeted to an all-time low. Decades of international trade restrictions, combined with domestic economic mismanagement and now fresh sanctions, are adding to the strain on businesses and households already struggling.
Meanwhile, talks aimed at shaping Gaza's post-war future are continuing at the United Nations, with members discussing security, governance, and reconstruction plans. It comes as disagreements remain over the disarmament of Hamas, Israeli withdrawal from the Strip, and the role of international forces in the territory.
I hear a lot of critics, as the High Representative said, hand-wringing and criticizing, but I don't hear a lot of alternative, credible plans. Now, for the first time, troops and personnel from partner nations are scheduled to arrive to keep the peace. Tactical vehicles are already at the ISF logistics base. Countries as far as Uganda, Morocco, Kazakhstan have offered thousands of troops to this effort. No, they are not moving as quickly as we would like, but they are moving. And yes, the disarmament of Hamas must and will be closely scrutinized. It must be verified by objective parties.
Now, Syria is moving towards reconnecting with the global financial system. It comes after Washington officially removed the country from its list of state sponsors of terrorism. In a show of support for the country's financial future, its president was seen making an electronic payment at a Damascus restaurant on Wednesday.
Ahmad al-Shara was using a Visa card seen at the Damascus cafe in the presence of Syrian Central Bank Governor Safwat Raslan. After the removal of the country from the US list of state sponsors of terrorism, efforts are underway to restore access to international financial services across the country. The ending of sanctions that have lasted more than 4 decades has opened the door for foreign investment and reconstruction efforts in Syria. Al-Shara called the decision a turning point, saying his country is entering a new phase of rebuilding and development. Washington said the move reflects steps by Syria's new government to distance itself from terrorism after months of negotiations. The decision has received regional support, with Turkey welcoming it as a step towards Syria's recovery. Companies such as Bank of America and MasterCard are also exploring ways to reconnect Syria with global financial networks. The return of international card payments could make trade easier, provide safer transactions, improve access to digital services, and help attract investment.
Now, Turkey's trade minister has been in Damascus for talks on reconstruction and investment. Turkey and Syria are looking to deepen commercial and economic ties, with the two neighbors aiming for $10 billion in annual bilateral trade by the start of the decade. Adamor reports from Istanbul.
Turkish Trade Minister Ömer Bolat held a series of meetings in Damascus on Wednesday as Ankara looks to expand its economic role in Syria's recovery and reconstruction. Bolat visited the Syrian capital with a high-level Turkish business delegation for the 63rd Damascus International Fair. Bolat and his accompanying delegation met Syrian economy and industry minister Nidal El-Shar, with whom they discussed means of increasing bilateral trade to $10 billion a year. The two sides also discussed ways to ease the movement of goods by improving cross-border transport and customs procedures. They also reviewed opportunities for Turkish companies to participate in Syria's post-conflict reconstruction. Turkish business representatives who accompanied the minister also outlined longer-term investment plans aimed at expanding production and creating jobs. Economic ties between Turkey and Syria have accelerated since the fall of President Bashar al-Assad's government in late 2024. Turkey has since emerged as a key regional supporter of Syria's post-Assad leadership after years of backing the country's armed opposition during Syria's lengthy internal conflict. Ankara is now seeking a major role in Syria's reconstruction, especially in terms of infrastructure, energy, transport, and manufacturing. For Turkey, expanding trade and investment in Syria could help stabilize its southern neighbor while also rebuilding economic links disrupted by more than a decade of war. This is Adam Morrow for A News in Istanbul, Turkey.
All right, after the break, Iceland prepares to decide on whether to reopen negotiations on EU membership, but could fears over fishing rights and independence scupper the hopes of the pro-EU lobby? Stay with us on A News. Welcome back to A News. Now, more of the top global stories. Chip maker Nvidia is forecasting a sharp rise in sales in the coming year, signaling that the boom in spending on artificial intelligence is still growing. Nvidia says it expects revenue in 2028 to grow by around 70%, while forecasting third quarter revenue of $108 billion, slightly above analysts' expectations. They added that demand for AI computing remains strong, although shortages of memory components could limit the country's or the industry's expansion. The company also plans, along with Amazon Web Services, to deploy 2 million additional graphics processing units next year, and in 2028. The so-called GPUs are needed for the next new generation of AI technology. The growing trade rift between the US and Canada is now hitting one of North America's biggest industries. Automakers are facing rising costs as the two neighbors remain at odds over tariffs.
Canadian automakers are facing higher costs after talks between the two countries broke down and Washington moved to double tariffs on Canadian vehicles and parts.
Good conversation with the Prime Minister last night.
US President Donald Trump announced on Monday that a 50% tariff on Canadian cars, trucks and auto parts will take effect on the 1st of January. That is up from the current 25%. The move came just days after manufacturers had hoped the two countries would reach a deal to reduce tariffs to 15% on Canadian cars and light-duty trucks. Canadian-built vehicles accounted for about 6% of American vehicle sales last year, but the impact could still be significant for companies including Ford, General Motors, Stellantis, Toyota and Honda. Toyota and Honda together produced more than 75% of Canada's 1.2 million vehicles in 2025. Higher duties on parts could also raise costs throughout the North American supply chain, as components regularly cross the US-Canada border during production. Meanwhile, US Trade Representative Jamieson Greer said there are currently no further talks between Washington and Ottawa. On Wednesday, Trump stepped up his rhetoric, saying it was time to teach Canada after the talks collapsed. Canada has already retaliated, imposing duties on around $20 billion worth of American imports, due to take effect on the 8th of September, alongside support for affected businesses and workers. White House advisor Peter Navarro warned that any future deal would be worse for Canada than the offer it rejected last week. However, industry sources remain hopeful that the January deadline leaves enough time for the two sides to reach an agreement and prevent the higher auto tariffs from taking effect.
Now, Meta has agreed to major changes on how teenagers use Facebook and Instagram. It ends a high-profile US legal battle over claims that Meta designed addictive products that hooked young people and misled the public about the safety of its platforms.
Meta has agreed to pay up to $17 billion and introduce new safety measures for teenagers, settling claims that Facebook and Instagram were designed to encourage excessive use among young users. The agreement brings an early end to a high-profile federal trial in which 29 US states accused the company of misleading the public about risks linked to its platforms. California Attorney Channel said the settlement would require major changes to better protect children online.
We sued Meta over claims that it designed and deployed harmful features on Instagram and Facebook that drive compulsive use and harm young users' mental health, and that the company knew about these dangers and lied to teens, to parents, and to the public about them. We believe the proposed settlement filed today addresses some of the concerns at the core of our lawsuit, and that it will force transformative changes necessary to protect our children. And importantly, these changes will be made within months. No more waiting.
Under the agreement, Meta will provide up to $17 billion to participating states over 10 years. California could receive between $1.5 and $2.1 billion if the settlement is approved. The company will also introduce new restrictions for teenage users, including a 2-hour daily limit and overnight access blocks between midnight and 6 a.m., unless parents allow otherwise. The settlement also includes stronger parental controls and additional measures to prevent children from accessing harmful content.
Now, the dispute between UEFA and FIFA appears to be easing. UEFA is expected to drop its threat to boycott FIFA competitions. It follows assurances that controversial plans to sell stakes in major tournaments have been abandoned.
The Union of European Football Associations is expected to end its threat to boycott FIFA tournaments after receiving assurances that plans to sell stakes in the World Cup and other major competitions will not be revived. The dispute began after FIFA proposed the idea, prompting UEFA's 55 member associations to agree on a potential boycott of FIFA events. FIFA later withdrew the proposal in July, and UEFA officials are expected to confirm the end of the boycott threat at a meeting in Monaco. A UEFA source said the decision was not a defeat, but aimed at protecting players' opportunities, while the push for changes within FIFA would continue. Despite easing tensions, UEFA is expected to maintain pressure on FIFA President Gianni Infantino over the issue. European League's president Claudius Schäfer has also called for reforms at FIFA, saying Infantino should not continue in the role. Infantino, who is seeking a fourth term next year, faces opposition from several football confederations, including UEFA, the Asian Football Confederation, and CONCACAF.
Now, Icelanders will decide this weekend whether to reopen negotiations on membership of the European Union. A new poll puts support for joining the bloc narrowly ahead in the polls, but the debate goes far beyond Europe, with fishing rights, national independence and security all playing a part.
Support for restarting Iceland's EU membership negotiations has slipped further, with a new poll putting the two sides just 2.6 percentage points apart. The Mosquina survey of 1,019 people found 51.3% support restarting talks with Brussels, while 48.7% are opposed. That's down from a poll on 13th August, when support stood at 52.2%. Iceland will vote on the issue on Saturday, 29th August. But this isn't a vote on EU membership itself. A yes vote would allow negotiations to restart, and any eventual deal would then have to be put to voters in a second referendum. Fishing remains at the heart of the debate. Iceland's fishing industry is central to both its economy and national identity, and opponents fear EU membership could mean losing control over the country's fishing grounds.
We have 100% of the profit in Iceland, and we want to keep it that way. So that is our worries if we join the common fisheries policy, is that this value chain that has generated all this profit for the Icelandic population, that will be torn apart.
For others, it's a broader question of keeping control over the country's own affairs. The debate has also been shaped by the cost of living, the war in Ukraine, and repeated threats by US President Donald Trump to annex Greenland. Iceland is already part of the European single market and the Schengen area. It's also a member of the European Free Trade Association. But it has no formal influence over EU decision-making. A Foreign Ministry memo estimates that, if Saturday's vote is in favour, accession talks could begin by the end of 2026 and take between 18 and 24 months to conclude.
Now, joining me for more on this is political analyst Enrico Cosero, who joins us from Madrid. Good to have you, Enrico.
Thank you, James. Thank you for having me.
All right, now, Iceland stopped its EU talks far back as 2013. Why has the question come back now?
Because the situation in Europe is not sort of a smooth situation. You have to take account here that the geographical space that involves Iceland is in dispute right now. It's in dispute because a lot of Russian trade routes go that way, because which was the starting of Donald Trump trying to claim for Greenland, and right now whatever in Europe sounds to Russian threat is gonna be taken in a huge consideration by the countries affected, and Iceland can't deny that their past and that their historical trajectory in Europe goes along with Sweden, Norway, Denmark, etc. So it's not a good time, and I think they're considering it's not a good time for being alone or trying to be some sort of isolated country that everybody is going to respect.
Mm-hmm. Now, Iceland already has access to the European single market. What is the economic case for going further?
I think that your question, which is a very good question, reveals something else, and it is that the split in the citizenship of Iceland, of the Icelandics, trying to decide if whether they get into the European Union or not, which means that we know for sure that, as you said, that Iceland has a very good commercial trading treatment by the EU. Why go further if that is covered? Probably because they're watching, they're trying to foresight any sort of coming crisis, and it's not a wild thing. Thinking about that, a crisis is gonna, especially a supply crisis, is gonna come after what is happening in Iran with the oil and worldwide with energy resources. So if that can keep the back and try to protect the back of Iceland, I think is a very good reason for some of their politicians and some of their political parties thinking that being part of the Union and try to have the protect of the European Union is an idea.
Now, fishing was one of the biggest problems in the last round of talks. For those who don't remember the cod wars of the 70s, remind us why fishing is still such a red line in Iceland.
Because as people from Iceland said, fishing and the banks are the huge wealth of the, and trying to share that, and or willing to share that wealthy and the resources in European Union, in which the fishing problem goes along year after year after year with the quotas and with the split and where you can fish and where you can't. It's I think for a main industry as fishing is in Iceland is gonna be a trouble. I think they're watching, they're seeing a threat coming in. These banks are not gonna be ours anymore. We're gonna have to share it, and they don't want. I think they don't want to jeopardize that that huge column, that huge wealth of the country.
Mm-hmm. Now, Iceland is a NATO member, but it has no standing army. Has the changing security picture in the North Atlantic altered the EU debate?
This reminds me of 1 year ago, not 1 year ago, maybe 8-10 months ago, with Donald Trump asking for the countries of the NATO to put more money. As you said, Iceland is in a very special regime in order to participate in the defense of the NATO and in the aims and goals of the NATO, as much as on its expense. And the situation here, Iceland, another part of the trouble is that Iceland can defend themselves, and as I said before, that makes Iceland a very easy target, and for put it some way, and for the Icelandics being completely unprotected or having no sort of backup from higher, bigger military alliance in front of Russia is gonna make him makes them sort of a weak country, and especially when on the other side Donald Trump is claiming for Greenland. If they're claiming for Greenland, why don't to offer some sort of pact or some sort of an accord to Iceland? So, from my point of view, living in an oblivion for so many years has become not being a very good idea. And we have to add to this situation, and we have to add to this status the huge importance of the banking in Iceland. Remember that during the crisis of 2008, Iceland was one of the first countries impacted by the crisis, and that crisis produced a huge economical crisis on the country. So all this, as I said before, living in some sort of oblivion during these years is not dealing really well with the current reality. So I think it's a good idea that Iceland is right now just re-questioning what is their position, what is its position in the world.
Now, finally, sir, even if a yes is given on Saturday, would only reopen negotiations. What could make those talks difficult the second time around?
The Europe asked to Iceland for all the requirements that has been asking for the different countries that wanted to join the union. It is not going to be a fast process. I think there is no fast processes in becoming a member of European Union. They can skip some points as the currency. They can as other countries are keeping their original currency and not adopting the euro. They can ask for that, and I think that is going to be a very good idea for the country. As I said, the financial industry is just so hard and is so important in Iceland. But as I said before, a yes is gonna imply to reopen negotiations, and that is gonna be for so long. And I mean, time goes by. In 6-8 years, we can see an Iceland belonging to the European Union as a member country. But this yes, as you said, and the stocks are 50-50. This yes is gonna open just the negotiations, and those negotiations can be broken or can be delayed as much as they can for as long as they want. So there's gonna be patience with this.
Thank you. That was Enrique Cosero, political analyst, joining us from Madrid, Spain. Good to have you, sir.
Thank you, James.
Meanwhile, France's growing debt burden is becoming a key issue in campaigning ahead of next year's presidential election. A controversial proposal to cancel part of the country's debt has intensified the debate over whether voters should back higher taxes or deeper spending cuts. Anita Sharma has more.
Welcome to This Day in Europe, where a radical proposal to wipe out part of France's public debt collides with a presidential race already being reshaped by economic anxiety. Far-left candidate Jean-Luc Mélenchon wants the Bank of France to cancel the government bonds it holds. He says the bank could simply take the 18% of French public debt and, quote, just chuck it in the fire, reducing the debt burden and freeing up money for public spending. Former IMF chief economist Olivier Blanchard has called the debate over the proposal idiotic. In an exchange on X, he argued cancellation would largely amount to an accounting exercise because the Bank of France would lose interest in profits it would otherwise return to the French government, while potentially undermining investor confidence. And that matters with French debt already above 116% of GDP. Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu issued an even starker warning on X. France needs to raise a record 310 billion euros this year, and he questioned who would keep lending if the country reneged on its commitments, warning investors could demand exorbitant interest rates. Later today, the argument moves onto the campaign stage. Mélenchon joins Marine Le Pen, Gabriel Attal, Edouard Philippe, Bruno Retailleau, Raphael Glucksmann, and Marine Tondelier for the first televised debate of the 2027 presidential campaign. Candidates will face questions from business leaders and respond to a consultation involving nearly 66,000 company executives. Expect debt, taxes, investment, and competitiveness to dominate, with Mélenchon under pressure to show his economic agenda can withstand scrutiny from businesses, investors, and political rivals. For A News, I'm Anita Sharma in Arnhem, Netherlands.
All right, after the break, we'll take a look at other top stories shaping the region. Stay with us. Welcome back to A News. Now, Armenia's former president, Robert Kocharyan, has been remanded in custody for 2 months following a ruling by the country's top anti-corruption court. Kocharyan remains in hospital after his health worsened following recent heart surgery. He is accused, along with others, of using his position to acquire public property at below market value prices during his 10 years in office until 2008. He was detained alongside his son and 4 others in raids on family businesses on Tuesday. Now, Kazakhstan is looking to strengthen international support for a major green energy project linking Central Asia and the South Caucasus. Together with Azerbaijan and Uzbekistan, it is developing a Trans-Caspian energy corridor that could eventually open a new route for green electricity exports. Our correspondent Farzeh Kalmaziner has the details.
Kazakhstan is working with the European Commission on a project to transmit green electricity across the Caspian Sea. The country's energy ministry says the initiative is being developed together with Azerbaijan and Uzbekistan. Astana is seeking the Commission's institutional support as the corridor could eventually provide a new route for green electricity exports to European markets. The idea is to create an energy corridor that would carry electricity from Central Asia across the Caspian to Azerbaijan. In the longer term, it could connect the energy systems of Central Asia and the South Caucasus, opening opportunities to export green electricity to Europe and other markets. And this could be a major venture. According to the project's consultant, it could integrate up to 5 gigawatts of renewable energy capacity by 2030. At this stage, it's still in the planning phase. A feasibility study is underway to determine how the corridor would work, its main technical details and its financial model. That study is expected to be completed in January 2027. Around 1 million euros has been allocated for the work, funded by the Asian Development Bank and the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. The 3 countries have already taken steps towards implementation. In June last year, Kazakhstan's Kigok, Azerbaijan's Azer Energy and the National Electric Grid of Uzbekistan signed an agreement to set up a joint company to move the project forward. Farzeh Kalmaziner, Almaty, A News.
The Middle Corridor is also at the center of growing transport and trade ties between Kazakhstan and Singapore. A new memorandum of understanding has been signed between the 2 countries to modernize logistics, digitize transport, and support trade along the corridor, which links China and Central Asia with Europe through Kazakhstan, the Caspian Sea, Azerbaijan, and Turkey. Trade between Kazakhstan and Singapore reached $777 million in the first half of the year, rising 2.5-fold on a year-to-year basis. For more on this, we're joined by Kaiser Nawab, Chairman of the Belt and Road Initiative for Sustainable Development, join us from Islamabad, Pakistan. Good to have you, sir.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon.
All right. Now, Kazakhstan and Singapore are now working together on transport, trade, and digitalization. What stands out to you about this partnership?
This is, I think, very important announcement. While we're seeing that Singapore itself has greater importance when we come up with digitalization, logistic efficiency, and their experiences and port management, and of course digital trade, supply chain efficiency. And then we see at the other side the Kazakhstan's importance as well. I think this middle corridor is now more important. The cooperation is between Singapore and Kazakhstan, but it is a greater importance in the whole region. And I think this is more significant because it also shows that middle corridor is no longer simply a regional transport project. It's increasingly becoming part of broader Euro-Asia trade and also connectivity architecture.
Now, Singapore is a major global logistics hub. Why is Kazakhstan looking to Singapore now as the middle corridor develops?
I mean, this Singapore is like a very visionary country in a sense, like a small uh, country which has greater importance when it comes to uh, port management, when it comes to transportation, or when it comes to even digitalization itself as well. And it's a major economy in the world. And I think Kazakhstan is potentially taping its location, its strategic location, and then uh, this cooperation with Singapore is much more effective and timely when we see the importance of transport and when we see importance of corridors, particularly while seeing this current crisis in the region as well. I think these transportation routes will be probably the more important in the coming future. Uh, just look at the war. I mean, recently where the Strait of Hormuz was blocked. I mean, this that the whole the dynamics of the wars and win and loss is now on the roots, and that was actually historical as well. So Kazakhstan is tapping its strategic location in the route itself, and Singapore is one of the important country and has a great experience in. I think this collaboration is timely and is, of course, Kazakhstan is looking at that. And China itself is also a great friend of Kazakhstan under the Belt and Road Initiative. Kazakhstan is an active member and then, of course, an issue as well. So I think this means that Kazakhstan has now greater international diplomacy where they engage the international major partners, including China as well as the Singapore as well.
Now, the middle corridor still faces delays and other bottlenecks. How important could better logistics and digital systems be to its future?
So these bottlenecks is, I think, one of the major problem in the corridors. I think uh, this middle corridor will be a great win-win situation for all the partners, stakeholders across that corridor, from Asia to Europe and from even Central Asia before to Europe as well, including Georgia, Turkey, Azerbaijan, and other partners. I think these all partners and stakeholders need to solve these issues in a multilateral and way in the form of diplomatic outreach and diplomatic approaches.
Now, Singapore says it wants, or it also wants closer links between Southeast Asia and Central Asia. Could the Middle Corridor become part of a much wider trade relationship between the two regions?
Yes, of course. I mean, Southeast Asia is a greater trust on Singapore as well. Singapore is like a role model for many countries, not only the Southeast Asia, but of course even in Asia and then in Africa as well. It is a greater example of governance. It is a greater example of a shining nation in a small time. So I think this leading role Singapore can play from the Southeast Asian countries and the trust they have on that and Singapore's leadership as well. And I think they can connect through their leadership and through their potential and through their economic situation with Kazakhstan. Not only with Kazakhstan, as you mentioned, with Central Asia, and then not only with Central Asia, it will leading to Turkey and then Europe as well. So this can be a greater significant and strategic route for the East Asian nations for the transportation, and of course the either way for you from Europe to Turkey to Azerbaijan to Central Asia and to the Southeast Asia.
That takes me to my next question. The route then crosses the Caspian through Azerbaijan, as you mentioned, before reaching Georgia, Turkey, and Europe. How important is Azerbaijan to the wider trade chain being built?
So Baku becomes, a central gateway between the Central Asia and Europe. So without Baku and without Azerbaijan, the Caucasus, the Caspian Sea, is more, importance without the involvement of Caspian Sea and of course the Azerbaijan and the Baku, this middle corridor project cannot be, completed. And I believe that Baku itself is much active and is doing larger diplomacy for making this route as much as possible to the practical steps. And has already the leadership of Azerbaijan is propagated about that and is already educated did their advocacy uh, about the making it happen of this middle corridor. And I think Azerbaijan is not only the, 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 the regional hub for the transportation, but of course its energy itself and its uh, others, importance is that it's a major source of energy towards the Turkey and towards Europe, and it can be this middle corridor can be very helpful.
Now, finally, sir, the middle corridor has gained attention as companies look for alternative routes through Russia or alternatives to routes through Russia. How much does geopolitics still shape the corridor's future?
So this is important question when we see the regional issues and when we see especially the wars in the region as well. And the international multinational companies, they of course are looking for something stable and for something peaceful, particularly when it's come to transportation. And I think one on another side, we see that it involves a greater economy as well, like it is a greater involvement of businesses, import, export as well. And I think a lot of charges and the fees through this transportation the countries can charge and can also develop their nation through these routes. Like the routes itself is not only a transportation, but it's the transportation of culture, it's the transportation of civilization, it's transportation of digitalization, the science and technology, the education. Before in the past, in the history, we have seen a very good example of the Silk Route. And I mean, this route was not just only the routes for the camels or for the transportation, but this was the routes for the knowledge, the exchange, the harmony, the peace. And I think the Russian and the other Central Asian countries, the all major stakeholders, they understand actually the importance of the route and they understand the importance of the corridor as well. And it's the benefit for everyone. It's not benefiting a single nation or a single company or a single stakeholder. I believe that, this is somehow a very, very developmental step towards the nation's development, the country's development, and the regional development itself as well. So we believe that, personally, that I think this can somehow having the interest of all the stakeholder, and that will probably be a stable one, and the international companies and the multinational businesses will take much benefit of that of that middle corridor. And almost all the nations across that middle corridors are very much stable in a way, and their leaderships are very much committed to making it happen in a practical way, and they are very much sincere to their own people as well.
Thank you. That was Kaiser Nawab, Chairman of the Belt and Road Initiative for Sustainable Development. Join us on Pakistan. Thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you.
Right now, closer economic and strategic ties between China and Uzbekistan were the focus of high-level talks in Beijing. China's top legislator, Zhao Leji, met with the head of Uzbekistan's presidential administration to discuss bilateral ties and future cooperation. Zhao said relations have reached an all-weather comprehensive strategic partnership. The two sides highlighted cooperation in the economy, transport and education, while Uzbekistan backed closer exchanges and wider cooperation with China. Now, Tashkent is preparing for a major expansion of its logistics infrastructure with a new terminal planned in partnership with international logistics company DP World. Our correspondent Severa Japova has more.
United Arab Emirates-based logistics company DP World is set to begin construction of a $288 million logistics terminal in Tashkent. The facility is expected to handle up to 150,000 containers and 120 million tons of cargo, providing additional capacity for the movement and processing of goods. The first stone for the project is expected to be laid in October. President Shavkat Mirziyoyev welcomed the plans, saying, "We have been preparing for this for a long time. This project is very important for us. It is necessary." The terminal is being developed as Tashkent expands its logistics and industrial infrastructure. The area around the existing industrial zone already has a project portfolio worth $1.2 billion, with 10 projects planned to launch this year. The project comes as the capital sees strong growth in investment and trade. Tashkent attracted $5.6 billion in investment in the first 8 months of 2026, while the city is targeting $9 billion by the end of this year and exports of $4 billion. Cyril Rajab reporting from Tashkent, Uzbekistan, A News.
All right, that's the news for this hour. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned to A News.